So, I wasn't raised in a Christian household at all, and there's no sort of Christianism that I'm really rebelling against. I was actually raised pagan, and paganism is a vague term, and I love using vague terms, but, growing up, when people ask me, oh, what sort of religion were you raised in, I'd tell people I was a pagan, and then I'd say, well, what's that? And then I'd say, yeah, I don't really know what it is. I mean, broadly speaking, I'll just use it as a term for any sort of non-Christian religiousness, like we did Yule or whatever when I was a kid, but, Greeks are pagans. I'll say, Hindus are pagans too, and Buddhists, but, just as long as people have an idea what I'm talking about. But anyway, as I said before, I kind of hate Buddhism, but at one point I was actually thinking about moving to India and going to, a Hindu school so I could better learn and appreciate paganism and live in a pagan environment. But if you ever want a test of religious faith, you can always go watch somebody bathe and brush their teeth in the Ganges River, which is one of the most polluted rivers in the world, and they continue to pollute it more by burning bodies in it based on their religious beliefs. And, I think that the principal function of spirits would be to give us guidance and help us make good decisions. And I just really, really have a hard time reconciling that with people believing it's a good idea to go bathe in one of the most disgusting rivers in the world. Which doesn't necessarily mean that I don't believe in spirits or stuff like that, but, people seem to think that if you communicate with a spirit, then you're necessarily getting some sort of good, accurate information. But, when you read, accounts of fairies and stuff, fairies in Ireland, they seem to respect Christian beliefs. A lot of them seem to believe in a roughly Christian worldview. But spirits, or jinn, are actually a big part of Islam, and in Islam, jinn are sometimes Muslims and sometimes not Muslims, and it's just, and there's Buddhist spirits that often believe in Buddhist things, or in in Japan, people worshipping native Japanese spirits will sometimes read them Buddhist scriptures to try to convert them into Buddhists. And so I just don't think that spirits are necessarily a reliable source of information if they exist. And I take existence to be a very light sense. If we accept that astrology is something unreliable, but it's something that can make predictions, then sure, I believe in astrology. You can make a prediction based on astrology. Whether or not it's going to be reliable is one thing, or you can use magic, I guess. Whether or not it's going to work is one thing. But I guess I kind of believe in spirits. I just think that they're unreliable assholes, and I don't really expect much out of them, and I often ignore it when people say that they saw a spirit. I assume it was something else. But on to gods too, yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I believe in gods, but again, if you take the world as indicative of what they're like, as in, gods are the things that are responsible for the world as it is, I think they're kind of assholes. Most pagan religions, you're at least supposed to pay lip service to the gods or think that they're pretty nice, but no, I think that they're pretty terrible. They're kind of shitheads, and I really have a lot of people say that they don't believe in God because they can't believe that, a loving God would damn people for all eternity, but I totally can believe that if the present world that we live in is anything to go off of. So, why I'm a Satanist and what separates me from not really being a pagan anymore, those are two of the essential things. I think that the world sucks, and I think that gods are unreliable assholes. But beyond that, I'm also selfish in a principled way. I believe that I'm supposed to be selfish, and I think that there are rules that I have. I really don't like hedonists. I know a lot of other Satanists, typically, they divide Satanism into theistic and atheistic Satanism, and I don't really have a clear distinction between the two. But I don't like drugs and alcohol. I don't like partying. I don't like things like casual sex and all that whatnot. I hate outright lying to people. But other than that, I'm a pretty selfish asshole. I think that the world is kind of an ocean of suffering and misery. I can help this one particular person who happens to be nearby, or I can feel empathy. I'm not inclined to feel empathy for people whenever I hear of horrible things happening to them, because I just remind myself, whatever horrible thing is happening to this one person, that same thing or something worse is happening somewhere else. I think I read a statistic that I think it's like maybe every second or every minute 2 people die on average. I think it's every second. And just, no particular... I'd like to feel bad for people, or thinking about doing quote-unquote good things makes me feel nice, but I just do not think that good feelings, are reliable indicators of truth or helpfulness. I've had good feelings about Satanism sometimes. People talk about how Jesus makes them feel safe, or Muhammad makes them feel safe, or whatever. And, if everybody's having those kind of feelings, again, I think that consistency and, getting the same outcome every time, or the marks of reliableness, and I just don't think that I get that from any sort of religious concept, whether paganism or otherwise. Again, I just don't think that pagan gods are good guides. But yes, I'm a selfish asshole, and